Yeah, a question that I really wanted to get to is because, finding out you're Native American, seeing how there is a bit of a negative history between Christianity and the Native American people.
Hmm.
Uh, when you tell, like me, if you go up to a fellow Native American and you tell them that you're a Christian, is there a bit of hostility between you two? Like they see you as you've been colonized or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. There are some derogatory terms that I've been called before. I've been called an apple. Red on the outside and white on the inside, and there are some. It's pretty common now to find especially in most of Native America, you're going to find Christians, and one of the misconceptions as well is like, um, most Native Americans were actually, were I forget what the term is now, postmodern. They were sort of postmodern in their thought even before postmodernism was really a coined thing. So they and this actually stems back from even pre-contact, because there was a lot of times where they were trading customs, they were trading, uh for goods, and so some of the ceremonial and traditional aspects of their life were commodities, right? So they w- they would literally trade for like food and goods and materials. They would trade a ceremony. So it'd be like you going to church and finding out, oh, these guys play they have these songs that they play, and they're unique to this particular church. So I want to buy the rights to be able to perform those songs in our church. So it was sort of that type of way. So there were certain religious ceremonies and customs, and even just, not, they didn't necessarily have to be spiritual either. They would There would be this, maybe this sort of dance that they would do that was very intriguing, and they would sell the rights to that. And so there was a lot of this conglomerate, type of activity where they would sort of piece together their own, sort of spiritual practices and customs and things like that. So bringing in Christianity wasn't that big of a deal. And there was a lot of tribes, especially first contact tribes, where people were coming to Christ left and right. But it wasn't until after these atrocities is and further on down the line, when the government started to try to take over stuff, and the church was in cahoots with that. So that's what brought a lot of the mistrust. So yes, there is a lot of mistrust, especially these new generations, because they understand and know more than any other uh, generation, because there's now been a push for a lot of native tribes and younger people to try to get a understanding or a hold of their old way spirituality, is probably the best way to coin it. Um, so there is sort of a hostility, and there is sort of this idea of you've been colonized, but they don't really use that terminology, but it is that essence, right? So there can be, but it's not on the front end. It's because most native people, like I said, they have the postmodern thought already. So what they'll say is, "Oh, that's good. I'm glad that you believe that way. That's good for you, right?" So here comes that postmodern thought, because now if you try to proselytize them and communicate them and evangelize them, then that's where the pushback comes in. Well, that's good for you, but I like to believe my own ways, my ancient ways. And they sort of throw that in your face, like, oh, our ways were here first, so therefore they're ancient. And see, that's where I really am grieved by the church, and them really not building a proper apologetic to really try to understand and know these people. Because if you could see, there's a lot of beauties and there's a lot of parallel to Old Testament or New Testament, early New Testament Christianity, right? Because there's a lot of things that were very communal. They looked at the community first. They took care of one another. They were slow to anger. There was a lot of the attributes that Christ himself had preached. And these are tenets that are embedded within the culture of most tribes. But because it didn't look like, walk like, act like, speak like European, automatically it was viewed as pagan, and they were nothing but savages or whatever, you know what I mean? Because they didn't wear the same type of clothing. So unfortunately, like, yes, it is those types of things. And those are real hurdles. They're not just simply, people being hurt for the sake of being hurt. Like, and these things aren't just things of the past. Because most people just see these as, oh, well, Indians, they dressed that way hundreds of years ago, or that's how they were hundreds of years ago. But listen, I was raised by a boarding school survivor. You've probably read and heard
horror stories about those boarding schools.
Yes, and so I was raised. My grandmother is the one who raised me, and she was a boarding school survivor, and she would tell me stories. And here's the thing: is I was big because my grandmother was she was one of the more respected elders within our community, and since I'm her oldest grandson, I have a responsibility to understand and know not only the customs but all our family ways. So and I'm going to be the next person up when it's time for my generation to take over. I'm going to have the responsibility and duties to understand and know how we're supposed to do certain things. And so my unique perspective is, look, I'm going to get to influence an entire generation of my family and essentially my entire community because I'm a Christian. So I'm going to eventually get to hold that position. And it's not like I'm a chief or any type of thing, but it's just because of who I am within my family. And I come from one of the biggest families within my community. But not only that, I also come from one of the most respected families in my community. So people would come to my grandmother for advice, and literally it was reminiscent as serving as who would be the pastor, right? You would go to your pastor for advice. You'd go to your pastor for guidance. You're struggling with certain things, even something like financially. There would be times where people would come to my grandmother and they'd be like, look, listen, I don't have anything. I want to sell you this thing. And, they would just need help with gas money or whatever, so they would literally come to my grandmother for these types of things. So in natural progression, I'm in line because I'm the oldest of my entire generation. And so that I have that unique responsibility. So because I have Christ and because I am, I am a follower of him, I have that unique opportunity to really to show people, and it's already happening. There's already things happening where my oldest uncle of his generation, of my mother's generation, he's already gone on and he's sort of already passed the torch to me. So there's things like funerals and family gatherings and those types of things that I am going to be responsible for, to help organize and to make sure proper procedures are and protocols are brought in place and those types of things. So I guess I'm sort of meandering, but I'm just trying to give you as big of a context as I can to sort of show you, like, this is why there's hostility. This is why, because there are things that are just sort of written off by the church community when they can see the beauty. Like, listen, like, there's just about this. Just imagine if somebody came to you and told you everything about your family or the things that you value are just completely trash, and you need to trash all of it, and you need to follow this particular way, and we all do that to an extent, right? Because we do have to.